401k. Well, you're not alone. In today's live stream, we're going to address that lingering question that many of us have when we're facing a career transition and guide you through the best way to handle the 401k when you leave a job. But before I get into that, I want to welcome you back to our weekly live stream. I'm Leah Hadley. I am the founder of Great Lakes Investment Management and Great Lakes Divorce Financial Solutions. And I help women who have spent a lifetime helping everybody else to get serious about managing their money with intentionality. I do that through money mentorship, financial planning, and strategic investment management. So last week we talked specifically about how to prepare for a career transition. We went through a variety of financial tips for career changers. And the most common follow-up questions we got to that video were all about what to do with your old 401k. So that's why that is the focus of today's live stream. But I just want to encourage any of you, if you do have questions, whether you're watching live or you're watching the replay, go ahead and put them in the comments and we will make sure to get them either responded to right now, or I'll come back and respond to them if you're watching the replay. It's important to make sure you're getting your questions answered, especially those that are unique to your individual situation. And when it comes to financial education, it's important to understand that we can provide kind of general guidance and education through a video like this, but we can't provide personalized financial advice. You really do need to know somebody's entire financial situation and their goals in order to be able to give individualized advice. But we can certainly go over what your options are as it relates to your 401k. And I'll tell you that there is a common question out there of, if I leave a job, shouldn't I just cash out my 401k? And I'm going to really discourage most people from considering that. And I understand that a lot of times when there is a career transition, there can be some pressure on cash flow in the short term. But a lot of times when we're making the decision to cash out a 401k, we're really only thinking about the short-term implications of that decision and not really thinking about the long-term implications. What does that actually mean for your future retirement, right? So other things to consider when you are looking at potentially cashing out a 401k are going to be things like the tax burden associated with that. For example, if you are under age 59 and a half, you may potentially be subject to a 10% early withdrawal tax penalty. Now, that's going to, again, depend on the nature of your specific situation. But in addition to that, if you are in a pre-tax account, the withdrawal on those funds are going to be taxed as ordinary income. So depending again on the nature of your financial situation, that's going to determine what the tax burden is on that withdrawal. And it may or may not make sense in a particular tax year, depending again on the nature of your situation. So it's really important to understand what are you actually looking at if you do cash that out. How is that going to impact your long-term retirement plan? But how is it going to impact you in the short term in terms of taxes? So lots of things to consider as it relates to that. I really look at three primary options as it relates to what to do with your old 401k. I really don't look at cashing it out as an option, but we do get the question a lot. Typically, there are basically three considerations. Number one, do you leave it with your former employer in the 401k account that it's in currently? And I will tell you that lots of people choose this option because there's nothing active that you typically have to do in order to just leave it where it is. And so it's very common just because there's nothing that you have to take care of. It is what it is. We'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of this in just a minute. Another option is going to be to roll your old 401k, your old employer 401k, into a new employer 401k. And so that when you start with your new employer, they're going to give you information about your benefits and whether or not your 401k could potentially accept a rollover from an old retirement account into that plan. We'll talk about the pros and cons of that in a moment as well. And last but certainly not least, to roll it into an individual retirement account or an IRA. That is another option as well. And we'll talk about the pros and cons of that. So really, those are the three options that I do primarily consider. I do try to, as much as possible, avoid considering cashing out if we can avoid it, because again, that really does deter from your long-term goals, right? So how about leaving it with your former employer? Well, in some cases, depending on the investments that you hold with that employer, you may decide that this is the best option for you. When I'm doing an analysis for clients and figuring out whether or not it makes sense to leave a plan in place, leave an account where it is, I'm typically looking at two primary drivers in that decision. One is going to be the investment options that are available within that plan, and the other is going to be the expenses associated with that plan. And while you may feel like you're not paying anything for your 401k, the investment expenses within the individual holdings are certainly a cost to being in that account. And sometimes when we do the review of those investment holdings, there is a significant cost that you may not be aware of. And sometimes plans have very low fee investment options, and there's everything in between. And so we do want to take a look at what do you hold in that account? What are your options in terms of what you hold in that account? And what are the investment expenses associated with that account when determining whether or not it makes sense to leave it with an old employer. Now, one of the things that we are not considering is the paperwork associated with moving it on, right? Those administrative things are things that we can deal with, take care of, and make sure that ultimately your retirement assets are really invested and optimized for your retirement plan going forward. That's really the focus here, right? So we're kind of ignoring any potential administrative hassle associated with making adjustments because that's really not the priority here. Sometimes we have to take care of those things in order to make sure you're really optimizing your financial planning, right? How about rolling it into your new 401k? Well, of course, we want to know if that's an option that's available to you. That's a starting point. But similar to what I was talking about with the old 401k, we want to know what investment options are available to you and the investment expenses in that 401k, right? And so keep in mind that some plans have fantastic investment options, and we are always doing reviews of our clients' 401k plans. So I really do see some with a great investment lineups and some that just don't have a lot of options, or maybe don't have exposures to certain sectors of the economy, or have limiting options that maybe don't make it the best place to have all of your retirement assets, right? But those are things that we are always looking at. Some plans are fantastic. And sometimes it does make sense to roll your old plan into your new employer plan. The last option that I mentioned was rolling it into an individual retirement account or an IRA. Now, it could be that if you have funds in a pre-tax 401k, you would be rolling them into a traditional IRA if you want to avoid any tax burden associated with rolling those funds over. If you are in a Roth 401k, rolling it into a Roth IRA in order to keep that money in an after-tax, tax-free growth retirement account, right? So you do have some options there. What I like about rolling it into an individual retirement account is the sky's the limit in terms of investment options. You get to choose what firm you're working with, in terms of where the assets are being held, but also if you have a financial planner that you're working with, making sure that they have access and can help to advise you on optimizing your investments in that account. You have a lot more control over the investment expenses that are associated with that account. So there certainly are some benefits associated with it. Now, with that being said, you could potentially have maybe some stock that you have in an old 401k plan that you need to maintain that plan in order to maintain that holding. There are unique circumstances that come up that ultimately can be a pro for a particular plan based on your unique circumstances that somebody else may just not have access to, right? And so that's where it's really important to understand what the options are, but really look at the pros and cons of each option and determining what is going to be the best option for you. I'll give you another example of a con when it comes to rolling funds into a individual retirement account. A lot of times people do take loans on their 401ks. Now, not all 401k plans are set up where that is an option, but many of them are. And you cannot take a loan on an IRA. And so if you know that you're planning to take a loan on a 401k, then you're going to want to make sure that those funds remain in that 401k. Also keep in mind, though, with an old employer retirement plan, you're not going to be able to take a loan. You're also not going to be able to contribute to that account. And so sometimes people will roll them into their new 401k plan in order to have those options be available to them. So there are a lot of considerations. There is no one size fits all solutions, but again, it really is important to know your options. These kinds of decisions can have a significant impact on your financial health in the long term, especially when it comes to something like retirement planning, where it really is about the time in the market and staying invested in order to be able to minimize the amount you actually have to contribute to those retirement accounts, because you get your money working harder for you over the long term, right? And so making sure that you are making those financial decisions, not in a vacuum, not just looking at what is the immediate need and what's right in front of you, but long term, and making sure that everything that you're doing is really optimized. So you're maximizing your investment returns while minimizing your investment expenses and the risks associated with those investments. And I do want to just extend an invitation. If this is something that you have questions about, if you have an old 401k that's sitting out there, if you have 6 401ks that are sitting out there, we've seen it all. So don't be shy. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions about what to do with old employer retirement accounts. You're just not sure, and you need somebody to help navigate through making some of these decisions, optimizing these accounts for you. I really do want to encourage you to reach out. And actually, we have a question here, so let me just. So the question is, if you have a loan on a 401k and you leave a job, what do you do about that? And that's going to depend on the specific rules of your employer's 401k plan or your former employer's 401k plan. In some cases, you can set up a payment plan and continue to make payments. In some cases, if you don't have the funds available to pay that off, you may need to take a distribution from the account in order to pay off the loan. That is going to be a taxable distribution in order to pay off the loan. So again, it's going to depend on the specifics of the options available to you with that plan, as well as your overall financial plan and your cash flow, what your options are that are available to you there. So it is going to be specific on a case-by-case basis. If you need help kind of sorting through that, don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you very much for the question. If anybody else has questions, again, I will come back and respond to any questions that are in the comments. And just want to encourage you, schedule some time with us. Let's take a look at these things together, figure out what is in your best interest, and make sure that you're optimizing your financial situation so that your money really is working hard for you. You work hard enough for your money as it is. I will include a link to schedule a call with me in the comments if you would like some